Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Elevate Football Show. I'm Joshua George, the founder of Elevate Football. On today's show, we have two major topics we're going to cover, one with U.S. soccer, and then later, we're going to cover a story on Lamine Yamal. So our first story is U.S. soccer and its Next Gen College Soccer Committee releasing a white paper proposing major reforms to Division One college soccer, including year-round season, regionalized clusters, and tiering that resembles promotion and relegation. Then later, we'll have a story on Lamine Yamal. So to cover our first story and talk about what this means for player development and youth systems in America, uh, let me provide some context on what this white paper entails. So U.S. Soccer's Next Gen College Soccer Committee released a white paper with recommendations for major reforms to college soccer, particularly the Division One level. So the aim to these reforms is to modernize college soccer. Their claims are to improve player welfare, reducing travel, aligning with global calendars, and potentially increasing visibility for Division One college soccer. Now, the problem with this, though, is um, why college soccer, right? So, how I see it is the goal for U.S. soccer, right, with our national team, but as a federation as a whole, should be to compete with the rest of the world. All right. However, we don't. Actually, for the amount of money and investment that we have in the US, we're actually very much underperforming on a global level, all right? Especially at the top level, all right? Right? We were embarrassed in Copa America. We got to the round of 16, which, all right, fine in the World Cup, but we're hosting this upcoming summer, all right? Right? It should be expected to put up a massive performance and to do really well in this tournament. The problem is, with our current trajectory, that does not look like to be the case. All right, and we have to look at, all right, why are we struggling to compete with the rest of the world? Not just at the senior level, but if we actually compare our youth academy systems to the rest of the world, we are very much underproducing top talent. All right, and my question is why. Um, so basically, their ideas are to use college soccer as the primary pathway into pro level football. The problem with this is the biggest thing that holds our youth academies back is this pay to play model. All right, how much talent do we lose because families and players don't have money to afford the top coaches, the top training, the top academies, and the top resources? All right, right? It's very much pay to play. All right, and in my opinion, this has been a major problem ever since the beginning of U.S. soccer. All right, in our federation, right? When we adopted the pay to play model, we severely handicapped ourselves. And my contention with this proposal with the white paper is if the ideas discussed in this white paper, right, if these reforms actually came into place, I think it would do more harm than good because college soccer is a massive component of the pay to play model. I believe it was the average cost of tuition in general across all levels. So D1 schools, D2 schools, D3, anywhere I think it's between 16 to 34,000 a year in tuition. All right. Now, of course, if a lot of athletes, they get scholarships and all that, you're still paying. But I think then if you count the average scholarships for athletes, um, don't quote me on this. I mean, please, if anyone's watching this, fact check me. But I believe it's still over 5,000, probably closer to 10,000. All right. So if the feeling I get from this white paper is that they want to make Division One college soccer the primary pathway into the pro leagues, whether it be USL Championship, particularly MLS and MLS Next Pro. The problem is if this becomes a primary pathway, hidden with a hidden pay to play model. All right. So you guys can fact check me, but most college players still have to pay some sort of money. All right, still have to pay thousands just to get into college soccer. All right. So if this is our primary pathway, then isn't it kind of a disservice towards players that in order to go through this pathway that they have to pay thousands of dollars just to play pro, right? Right? In the rest of the world, a lot of the academies, they're free, right? They'll invest in the player, get them to the pro level, sell them off. That's what all the clubs do. That's why every club in Europe has a youth academy. All of them, right? They produce top players, they promote to the senior team, they sell them off to go to bigger clubs. All right? And that's how they make the ROI on the players. But we have this idea that with these non-pro players that are still developing, that we should charge high prices just for them to even have an opportunity. All right? And like I said, if we make college soccer, and in a lot of ways it already is, right? It already is a primary pathway for American players already. So if it's the primary pathway and they want to bring these such reforms, why are we still going with a massive paywall? Why is our primary pathway to professional soccer for these players a massive paywall of thousands of dollars? All right. Why can't we bring reform to our youth academies, get those to be as cheap as possible, as affordable as possible, right? And through the youth academies, through the MLS academies, right? Use those systems to provide opportunities for players. Why does that have to be college? And not only that, there's other problems with making college soccer the primary pathway as well. One, the goals, I believe, the goals for college soccer and U.S. soccer completely different, right? Understand, the varsity teams, the varsity levels, especially at D1, but across all levels, right? What's their priority? To win. It's not development, it's to win. Simply put, it's to win, right? To win titles, all right? Right? Understand, a varsity team is like a first team, all right? There's only one priority, to win, all right? Development is secondary, all right? So if U.S. soccer wants to invest into the development of players, wouldn't it be better to suggest reform to put their focus and investments into programs where the primary focus is development? Wouldn't that be better? Right? That's my question. Wouldn't that be better? All right. Two, in college athletics as a whole, right, including college soccer, performance and playing time is tied to academics. All right. So you can have an insanely talented player. All right. You have an insanely talented player, but maybe he's just not good at a good test taker and his grades suffer. You're telling me that he's going to get benched? Right? He's your top player. He performs very well. Definitely a prospect for the pro level. But because he dyslexic or struggles with tests, all right, whatever the reason might be, that he's going to be benched. All right? Because the school says so. Doesn't that undermine the goals of our development systems, right? If we want to make our national team and our federation the best it could be, the most competitive to compete with the rest of the world, wouldn't it be better to prioritize talent, hard work, skill over grades? All right? And I'm not trying to no diminish the importance of education. Education is very important, but all right, if we from a pure athletic perspective, all right, if we look at just the soccer, right, just the football, all right, wouldn't it be better to have our priority be solely to develop and produce the best players we could possibly can? All right, shouldn't that be the priority? All right, why? And then can we really fulfill that objective if we are tying our players down to academics? All right. Again, education is important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of playing time and player development, right? Like I said, a player who struggles in school shouldn't be punished by having their playing time taken away from them. All right, it shouldn't. All right, a player whose primary focus in life is to play and get to and play at the professional level, their focus should be the football. It shouldn't be the school. It shouldn't be the academics. All right. Especially since in football, you really don't need a college degree to get any sort of work in football. Some areas, fine. You know, it might help. But to be a coach, you don't. To be a kit man, you don't. To be a referee, you don't. All right. A lot of jobs, within the clubs, like in the office side of clubs, you get there off connections. All right. So again, what's the purpose of tying players down to academics over their playing time, right? Shouldn't we have them put all their focus, if they truly want to play professional football, shouldn't we give them an environment to put all of their focus, all their time and effort into that goal? All right, that's my biggest concern, and I think our goal as a federation, as U.S. Soccer, should be to compete with the rest of the world, all right? To become a respected nation in global football, all right? To compete, all right? But if we're tying players down and holding players back from with our play-to-play model, with academics, there's of course all sorts of other reasons, all right? Um, is that really can we really achieve our goal of being the best we can if we're holding our players back? And I feel and because of that, I feel that college soccer holds players back too much, and because of that, shouldn't be the primary path to pro. I think the primary path needs to be systems, and I believe it should be the academies, right? Make the youth academies the best that they can be, all right? So players don't need this college route, right? That through their youth academies, right? That their youth academies are tied to professional clubs, to first team clubs, and through their academies, they can reach the professional level, right? That right, and that path should be affordable. It should be based off merit on football, not academics. And I think if we want to compete with the rest of the world, that needs to be the path, right? It cannot be college. College ties players down to unnecessary things, whether it's lack of money, academics, right? College, simply put, it's just not the best path, right? Um, right. If we want to look at the top nations in the world, right, and we want to compete with them, we need to look at what they do. They don't use colleges. What they do is they have lots of clubs in many leagues. All those clubs have youth academies, right? You go to Spain, there are 5 professional levels, all right? Professional leagues. Just about all those clubs have youth academies, right? Where players can get promoted to the first teams in their clubs, all right? Or they can transfer, all right? It is affordable, right? Most of them are free, all right? And no wonder Spain produces talents like Lamine Yamal, all right? One of the best players in the world. And yet our best player, nowhere near that level, right? We don't produce enough talent. It's simply put, we have a lot of talent, we have a lot of potential, but we have yet to find a way to best cultivate that talent and really utilize it and grow it to be the best it can be. And I think we need to understand that how our methodology with our other sports, such as American football or basketball, doesn't work with soccer. They don't, right? The college path, the college idea with American football worked for that sport. Why? It's an American sport. But our football, soccer, isn't an American sport. It's a global sport. All right? And on the global level, we're very much underperforming. We need to figure out why and make those changes. And I think the best thing we can do is to look at which countries are dominating global football and learn from them, right? Let's stop applying our American methodology from our other sports and applying it to soccer. Instead, let's adapt and adopt what we see globally in football, bring their ideas into ours so that way we can go compete with them. Because obviously this quote unquote American way of soccer doesn't work. All right, and I think we need to adapt and change. And I don't think college is the best path for that. College athletics is a very American idea, right? But is should we invest into college soccer at the cost of under reforming our youth academies? Right? My opinions, no. We should put our time and effort into making the academies the best they can be, where a player going from 6 years old up into adult age, that they get an affordable path that's the best it can possibly be, with the best coaches, with the best development, the best training, give them the best ecosystem possible to get promoted to a first team and into first team football, right? So massive rant, massive rant. But yeah, I think if I get why U.S. soccer uh wants to change college, because for most sports that's the American way, college sports. Um, but again, soccer isn't it's not an American sport; it's a global, and we need to find ways to compete globally. Yeah, to find ways to compete globally. Um, and I think right now we're America is kind of a laughing stock in terms of global football. And so we need to have a serious conversation. All right, how do we compete and through competition show ourselves like, okay, we actually mean business. We can go compete and we could do well in the World Cup. We could do go into Copa America and compete, that we aren't just some laughing stock. I think a part of that is we need to adopt the ideas of the top countries. All right, we need to look at them and be humble in that we acknowledge their greatness and we need to learn from them. Um, and a part of that is youth academies. Make those great. All right, college soccer not the way. Make youth academies great. Make that the primary path. It makes no sense why MLS Next Academies are not the primary path, and that you have to go from an MLS Next Academy tied to an MLS club and then go to college. Makes no sense, right? If you're in an MLS Next Academy tied to an MLS club, you should be able, right? If you're good enough, if you have the talent, if you have the skill to go from that academy team right up into the first team. You shouldn't have to go to D1 college just to get drafted. And that's a whole other thing. The draft makes no sense. It's American, it's outdated. I'm not, anti-American ideas, with soccer, but some of these ideas just I really hinder us from maximizing our potential as a country. I think we could easily be a very competitive country on a global level, but we keep doubling down on these old school systems that just don't work. All right. So next story, Lamine Yamal. We're going overseas. We're going to Spain, Barcelona. Lamine Yamal just broke up with his girlfriend Nikki Nicole. Um, this show is not going to be about football gossip, right? I really don't care about relationships of players and all that. This one, however, is interesting in that this has a lot of lessons to be learned for any youth player. All right, Lamine Yamal, top player, right? Right, massive inspiration. Um, but as a lot of Barcelona fans know, there's a lot of headaches and problems with Lamine Yamal, especially with his relationship, with his life outside of football. And again, for youth players, there's a lot of lessons to be learned here. So, for context, Lamine Yamal, one of the brightest young stars, FC Barcelona, everyone knows that, right? Um, yeah, there's been a lot of he's been in a lot of headlines, in football news. Like I said, massive breakup. Before that, he um, was a complete ghost in the last El Clasico. All right, talked a big game, got absolutely humbled in El Clasico. And fair play to the Real Madrid players and their team. because they definitely outperformed Barcelona that day. So, but what does this mean for you and I? All right, what can we learn from this? Because we're seeing a trend, especially with the next with these new generations of players, with the next generation of players, we're seeing a lot more ego, right? And I know this because I played, no, with no during my time in no playing for youth club, playing overseas, in an international academy. I've seen it. I've seen a lot of young players that have massive ego, like seriously massive ego, right? Why? Right? How I see it is because they're looking at the wrong players, and the players they're looking at, they're taking the wrong lessons. They're learning the wrong things. For example, one of the biggest stars amongst youth players is Vinicius Jr. A lot of youth players love Vinicius Jr. The problem with that though is the playstyle of Vinicius isn't it at times can be a bit more flashy um than it is a disciplined sort of play style. I think that kind of goes against the ideas and principles for developing youth, which needs to be higher emphasis on discipline and fundamentals over the flash. I mean, that's one, again, back to US soccer, one of the reasons why we've struggled for so long is we've had a higher emphasis on physicality and 1v1 battles, not actual technical strategic play, right? So a lot of players looking at Neymar, Vinicius Jr., now Lamine Yamal, um, and they want to be flashy like them, right? They want the lifestyle, they want all the tricks, but we underemphasize the importance of discipline, professionalism, and foundational play, right? So take Lamine Yamal, right? We look at his lifestyle, right? A lot of flash, yeah, the birthday party. Personally, I don't care, about the private lives of players. What I do care about though is how the imprint that the decisions of these professional players have on our youth and helping our youth out so they don't take the bad habits of these players, but they take the good. And I think with players like and with youth players that are fans of, Neymar, of Vinicius Jr., of Lamine Yamal, is they they're attracted to the flashiness and the spectacle of these players, and because of that, they ignore a lot of the discipline and fundamentals that a lot of these players have, and just in general. Um, I think players need to stop watching so much of Vinicius Jr. and they need to start watching more De Bruyne or Rodri, right? Players that whose play styles are built on the foundations of the game. Um, yeah, players that are built on the foundations of the play. The reason why is because for a lot of youth players, especially in America, who are coming up underdeveloped, their focus needs to be on the foundations, right? Who cares about trying to rainbow flick and doing all these crazy, spectacles when you can't even make a consistently precise ball pass, right? When you can't shoot the ball on target 10 out of 10 times, right? Right? That's why I love players, like for youth players, that's why I always preach study players like De Bruyne, Rodri, Joshua Kimmich, Mueller, because these are players whose play styles are built on foundations, which is where our youth players need to be focused on, right? Foundation, all right? Once they built the foundation, then you can go and bring the flash, bring the spectacle. I'm not trying to uh, say that, flash and dribbling and spectacle is bad. No, it's actually great. It makes the sport beautiful, but all that spectacle has to be built on a strong foundation, And the problem with our youth players is they want the spectacle, they don't want the foundation. All right, which is hurting their own development. Right, and I think coaches need to do a better job of going to these players like, you want to play spectacular football, awesome, all right, but you have to have the foundation. So I think we need to have a higher emphasis on the foundation. So kind of tying it back to this story on Lamine Yamal, right? We learn a lot of lessons on the mental side. Now this is a very underdeveloped aspect of the game, right? It's the mental side, and I think in a lot of ways, Europe I think is a lot better with it. I think in America it's very much underemphasized and underprioritized is the mental side, the professionalism, right? Right? We need to make our players as disciplined as possible, right? They need to be disciplined. They need to be professional, right? Right? The flash needs to be earned, and I think the problem with a lot of these young players is they have a high egos, and they feel entitled, right? This is really going to hurt not only themselves, right, in their development, but this is going to hurt football as a whole. This will hurt their teams. This will hurt their clubs. And just again, in general, if we have a generation of players that are have this sense of entitlement, it's going to make the game very unhealthy. In a lot of ways, it's starting to be that already, right? So when we look at Yamal, when our youth players, so if you're a coach, a director, a parent, or even a teammate, and you have these kids that are looking at Lamine Yamal, that are looking at Vinicius, Neymar, and these are their favorite players, right? So let's take Lamine Yamal for example. Um, it is important that the lessons they learn is take they learn from the good aspects of these players, but they also learn from the bad, right? So with Lamine Yamal, professionalism, maturity, right? We saw, and to be fair, it was possibly very much it probably was over dramatized by the news that, oh, Lamine Yamal's this unprofessional player that's just doing whatever he wants and all that. I'm sure he's a lot more professional in reality, but how do these players look at but how do our youth players look at these professionals, right? They don't know them in person. They look them through the news, all right? So in the news, right, on TV, on social media, what do they see? Flash, parties, entitlement, ego, doing whatever they want, all right? And that's a bad image and message for our youth players, right? So the true lessons to be learned from Yamal isn't that, oh, it's cool to have extravagant parties. Oh, it's, right? It shouldn't be that it's cool to be entitled to talk a big game and then you go and underperform, right? Because you overstep your limits, right? And then you got humbled, right? It should be, hey, Lamine Yamal got humbled by Real Madrid. That's the truth, all right? A lot of Barcelona fans don't like him, all right? They're very, very, they want to love him, but they're very frustrated with him. Right now, he doesn't have the full support of the fans. And the truth is, that's his fault. So we need to look at these stories and these things and use these as lessons for our players to teach them the importance of maturity, of professionalism, right? If you want to go play at the professional level, you have to act like a professional. You can't act like a child, right? You can't just have a big ego and do whatever you want. You actually have to put your head down, work your tail end off, all right? And do the right things to get professional, because it is one thing to make it to the professional level. It is a whole other thing to stay there. Take Neymar, for example. He was on top of the world at Barcelona, all right? Had it all. But because he lacked a lot of the professionalism and the discipline, all right? He fell off. Never got the Ballon d'Or. Never won a World Cup. Went to PSG, right? And nothing. right? So it's right. So once you make it, the lesson has to be once you just because you go to professional football, it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of discipline and professionalism. Most teams and most coaches don't want a player with the ego and attitude of Lamine Yamal. They want players with the attitude and professionalism of Thomas Mueller, of Rodri, of Toni Kroos, right? Of De Bruyne, right? Those are the players that a lot of these youth teams and these low level first teams want. They don't want the Lamine Yamals. They don't want that attitude, right? They don't want that ego, right? So if you have the talent, if you want to emulate the skill of Lamine Yamal and the playstyle, fine. But you have to be grounded in professionalism and discipline and have a strong mentality in order to have such a playstyle. All right, this is how we need to teach our players. All right, that you cannot just because you have an idol, this particular player is an idol, and you want to emulate their playstyle, right? You cannot forget to about the discipline, about the professionalism. That's the foundation, right? And we need to really emphasize with these youth players that the foundation, it's the foundation for a reason. It is so important, all right? It is so important for the success of any player. But the problem is, right, we're starting to see it slowly, is we're starting to see a culture of these players are not being humbled. They're not disciplined, and we're letting their egos run rampant. Um, Players like Lamine Yamal need, right, if they truly want to play at clubs like Barcelona, right, Lamine Yamal needs to be very professional, right? He has to tone down the ego, right? Be humble, be professional, right? Represent the club, right? Right? We need for players that are playing in clubs, it's not the idea shouldn't be, oh, it shouldn't be about the self, it should be about the club. So for anyone who's watching this and you're a part of a club, whether you're first team and you're an adult, whether you're a kid playing for a youth academy, be a good representation of your club. If you're being acting immature, goofing around, uh, talking trash, about other teams or all that, you are a bad representative of your club, and eventually that's going to come back to haunt you, guaranteed. For all of us that play in clubs and on teams, we have to represent our team. And the best way to represent our teams is through professionalism, through discipline, through hard work, all right? By being humble, all right? Right? So, again, to kind of just summarize this story, we need to do a better job globally of disciplining youth players so they don't, right? We cannot let their egos take over and take control. Because of that, we'll see a lot of talented players that'll burn out. It will not make it because again, it's one thing to make it to the the top levels, the top flights of the game. It's a whole other thing to stay there. And I feel a lot of these players, they're gonna climb to a high level, but they're gonna crash and burn like Icarus because they don't have the foundations of discipline and professionalism to keep them grounded. And I think that needs to change sooner rather than later. So these players that are disciplined can actually build the foundation. All right. If we want to make football the best it can be, we need players to value the game and treat it with respect. Right. Right. Especially with clubs. Players need to be good representatives of the club, right? No player is bigger than the club, right? That's a statement that's been said for as long as I can remember. The history of the game, it's always been said since the dawn of time. All right, no player is bigger than the club. Right now, though, we're seeing a lot of players that think they are bigger than the clubs. Right? We see it at the top flight, right, with certain players like Vinicius, Lamine Yamal, right, Neymar, and that mentality starting to seep down into our youth levels. We're seeing youth players, right, being selfish, being about being about themselves and thinking that they're bigger than the club. No, that's not how it works. No player is bigger than the club. And we need to take that message and ingrain it into our youth players, into across all levels, right? No player should ever be bigger than the club. And all players in a properly run club should make sure that their players, right, whether they're in the first team, the B team, or in the academy, that all players that wear their badge are the best representatives possible of that club, right? That needs to be the level of standard we need to have, all right? That, in my opinion, needs to be the standard. Unfortunately, though, we're kind of stepping away from that, and I think we need to definitely turn back towards that level of standard. We saw this. We saw this standard. It was amazing, especially like in before my time. We saw early 2000s, 90s, 80s. Meant Ferguson's Manchester United was a huge example of that principle that no player is bigger than the club, right? And no wonder, uh, Ferguson's considered one of the best managers of all time, right? And that was the foundational principle to his style of coaching. No player is bigger than the club. I think we need to go back to that. And I think for America, for example, because I'm American, if we can really double down on the foundations, the discipline, the professionalism, right? These kind of fundamentals, I think that would also help our youth system as well. I think a great good example of that is Germany, uh, because they do have a lot more standards. It's a lot more focused on the team, not necessarily the individual. And I think that's actually really good, um, because yeah, because like Germany, for example, they don't have many stars, but they always produce great teams. Right? I mean, look at Bayern, 16 games in a row, wins. But they're a very disciplined team. All right, I think for youth players and then U.S. soccer, the message should be, if you want to play at the highest level, if you want to compete at the highest level, whether you're a youth player or a club or a entire soccer federation, right? This is a good lesson for even U.S. soccer as a whole. The foundation of greatness is discipline, mentality, hard work, humbleness, confidence, right? To have that balance of humbleness and confidence, and professionalism, right? These sort of virtues, these mental ideas, that's the foundation of greatness. Whether it's in business, baseball, boxing, MMA, Formula One, and even here with football, right? These are the foundations of greatness. And I think we really underemphasize, we don't teach these foundations enough to our youth players, which is why we're seeing an increase in ego and individualism in football. And individual, isn't bad, but it's unchecked in many, many cases. Not always, but in many cases. So I think in order to keep that under control and to keep players as good representatives of the club, to not stray away from that, we need to bring back and start emphasizing and teaching these fundamentals again and these foundations. So that way, again, back to youth players, that these youth players then actually can have the environment to build the strong foundation to then go on and to be successful, then to go on and then add the flair, to add the magic of the game. But if we look at some of the greatest players of all time, right, the magic is built on top of a foundation. Right, the magic is built on top of foundation. If you are a player with all magic but no foundation, you're really going to struggle in this game. And that is just the truth. All right, you have to have a foundation. And for many youth systems, especially for youth systems that often underdevelop players, right? Because we see this a lot in the cat in our youth ecosystem in America is is to when we have players that are underdeveloped and we need to turn that around and start really developing them and investing into them. We need to have that foundation, um, and build up that foundation for them. All right, because again, to be great requires you to have foundation. Right, you have to. All right, every great athlete, every great player has foundation. Right, right, of discipline, of hard work, talent. Yes, talent, skill, but there's a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline, um, and a lot of them are have maturity and professionalism to know how to check their ego and be good representatives of their teams, right? And this is what we need to ingrain into the youth players. Um, so whether it's U.S. soccer or globally, we need to have that shift. And I think it'll overall it'll be good for the sport. If we can bring back discipline and professionalism and maturity, if we can bring back these sort of virtues back to the game, it'll make the sport healthier, and it's actually going to help the players because then the players will then have the foundation to be successful. Then we'll see more success in the game, and we'll see more players not only making it to the top levels of the game, but actually staying there. So, yeah. So, again, to recap, of course, we have this white paper produced by U.S. Soccer. Um, again, do please by all means do your research. Now, I actually have some of my sources linked in the description below of this video for you guys to go check out for yourselves. If anything I said is wrong, any of the facts information I said is wrong, by all means fact check me. Right, I encourage it. If you have different opinions or if you agree, of course, leave comments. Like I said, a lot of, these are just my opinions. But as a player and as a coach who's not only been a part of the American ecosystem but has been overseas as well, um, these are just some of the trends I'm seeing, and I'm kind of seeing these trends play out in these two, in the many of these stories that we're seeing on the news for football, particularly these two stories. So like I said, a lot of these are just my opinions. Um, and yeah, if anyone thinks otherwise or has other thoughts, by all means, I am all ears. Like I said, you can fact check me on anything. I'll have the sources linked below. Um, so yeah, this is the first episode of the Elevate Football Show. Um, yeah, so of course this first episode is a bit choppy, but the goal is to get this better, and the goal of this show is to provide education and insight into how the football industry works. Um, as being a player myself and even being a coach, there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of lack of education, especially at the youth level, but even at the senior level, there's a lot of lack of education of how this industry works, right? A lot of people are very knowledgeable on everything that happens on the pitch, right? The formations, the tactics, right? Possession play, counterattack, all that, but not. But I think fewer people actually know truly how this industry works, especially youth players, right? This I know for a fact that there are not many youth players that truly know how this industry really works. Um, right? And I was one of those people, right? For the longest time, I was one of those people. And when I went overseas and I really started learning and seeing just how this world works, that's where I really learned, okay, yeah. Now there's a lot of players don't know about how this industry works at all. So that's kind of the goal of this show. We run this show through my company, Elevate Football. All right. And like I said, the goal of the show is to provide education on the industry, basically to teach the next generation of players, about how football works off the pitch, right? To teach them about like the industry secrets, what happens behind the curtain off the pitch, right? The things that they don't always know about, because these things are very important to understand and know, especially for youth players who want to go to the top level, right? Because if they can learn these things now, and if they can learn from what's happening in football, then they'll be better for it, and they'll learn how to navigate this world, and then that's increasing their chances of being successful in this industry. So that's kind of the goal with this show. Um, Again, this is kind of more casual information, just talking, covering various stories, various topics. Of course, on the show we'll have more topic specific videos as well. Um, we got a lot of other big projects in the works as well. Starting with an ebook that we produced about how to go from the United States over into Europe. So if you're a player in the United States and you want to learn how to go overseas and play in Europe through the lowest barrier of entry possible, we actually have an ebook on our website available. It's not a whole lot of money. The reason why we charge money for it and we have a price tag is just to help us fund our bigger projects. So if that's something of interest to you, if that's a goal of yours, it's not a whole lot of money. Go check it out. Check it out. Like I said, there's a lot of good stuff. It's very, call it the International Blueprint, right? It's very step by step, right? Very simple. But the idea behind it was to kind of give a blueprint of how to go from point A to point B, right? To go from the United States over to Europe in a very step by step, simple blueprint that anyone can understand and follow. Because the truth is, it actually is really simple to go to Europe. It's not easy, but it's simple. And like I said, I think the ebook that we produced it's a good resource to have just to get it right, to get a good idea of what that path looks like. And like I said, it's when you guys do purchase our ebook, it does help help us fund our bigger projects. Because like I said, we have a lot of projects in the works. We have a lot of exciting stuff we want to produce and give to you guys. So if you are interested in kind of learning, the path to going to Europe, as a youth player, check that out. And like I said, if you do decide to purchase, it does really help us a lot. To get that, because that's one of our that ebook is one of our ways in which we get funding to fund our bigger, better projects. But of course, we have other stuff coming out. Again, a lot of things in the works. I know I'm rambling on and I'm repeating myself a lot, but that's just because I'm just very excited of what we have in the future. At here at Elevate, and yeah, and this show is just one of those things. Um, this show is one of the ways we want to provide value to you guys, provide education to help you guys learn more about how this industry works. Right, because that's our focus. Right, to provide education to teach. Yeah, so kind of I guess our mission is here at Elevate Football. We exist to educate, equip, and empower footballers worldwide to reach their God-given potential, both on and off the pitch. Particular things off the pitch, and teach them about the actual industry itself. So that's kind of the mission. With this show, with our ebook, and then with our other projects that are in development right now. That's kind of the idea, to educate, equip, and empower the next generation of players. Because I'm a big believer that that this the next generation, they're gonna be the caretakers of this sport, right? With this next generation, we're seeing the next generation of players, of coaches, of owners, directors, right, of agents, right? There's so much opportunity for this next generation, and we want to play a part, even if it's just a small role, right? We want to do our best to play our part in helping the next generation rise to the occasion to educate and empower them to go and be good caretakers of this sport, and make this sport the best it could possibly be. Because of course we see a lot of greed, a lot of corruption in this sport. And I think there's going to be an opportunity for the next generation to really fight against that and take over and make this sport the best it could possibly be. And so I guess our goal is to play a small part in helping that happen and come to fruition. So that's it. Episode 1. Again, very rough. But all those who watched the end, of course, I very grateful for you guys. Like I said, we want to help you, and we want to help players, and we want to play our part in making this sport the best it could possibly be. That's our goal. That it simply put, right? We want to help players be the best they can be. We want to help this sport and this industry be the best it can be, right? And we want to play, and our dream is to see the sport improve and become better. And we want to play a small. We'd like to play a small part in that. So that's a big goal for us. So for those of you that watched until the end, thank you. And if you want to keep supporting us, be on the lookout for more content coming to this channel. And of course, we have a whole list of projects in development that I think we have some. They're going to be awesome. We got a lot of good stuff. All right, this is episode 1. Again, this is the Elevate Show. This is Joshua Durlich. All right, take care.